For therapy, reach out to CatholicHealingInstitute.com. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Mary, Mother of Healing, pray for us, amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Today in the Catholic Healing series, I am talking about healing bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders, actually managing them. If you enjoyed this talk, please check out the other articles and videos in the series. It is the Catholic Healing series. God bless. Bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders are characterized by significant and persistent shift in mood, energy, and activity levels. Often there are manic, hypomanic, or partial episodes. I'll give a brief walk through my particular diagnostic manual, the DSM-5, and talk about where each of these show up. So on the high end of the scale, we have bipolar 1, which is where there's a full manic episode. Usually, that means that it's going to be a week or more of a manic episode. In this manic episode, there's decreased need for sleep, racing thoughts, and impulsive behavior. There can be a grandiosity, maybe a little bit differently than we experience it in the case of narcissism. I work with narcissism a lot, whereas in narcissism, it's kind of the grandiosity is a shamelessness. Unfortunately, in the case of bipolar 1, sometimes it's almost a sense of being invincible or believing that you're God or the Antichrist or something like that. Pretty serious stuff. You know, bipolar 1 is what we have on the high end of the spectrum of diagnosis. In the manual, there's also bipolar 2, which is more of the depressive type of bipolar. You have to qualify for a major depressive episode, which is going to be 2 weeks or more of depressive symptoms. And then there are going to be periods where there is at least hypomania, and that's going to be at least 4 days of a lot of those manic symptoms in a row. And that is bipolar 2. Then there's cyclothymia. A person in a heightened state may not qualify for all the symptoms of a hypomanic or manic state, and they might not qualify for all of the depressive symptoms in a depressed state. But still in cyclothymia, there's this sense of mood. There's this sense of, if we were to track people's mood in all of these situations, it would look like this sine wave that's going up and down. And in the up states, those are those heightened moments, either manic, hypomanic, or just a heightened state. And then in the down states, it's various versions of depression and being down. Definitely in the depressive state, there can be sadness, hopelessness. That's a lot of the hallmark of the depressive state. It is true that especially when people are in a heightened state, sometimes there's actually what's called a mixed state. And in a mixed state, a person unfortunately has both the symptoms of mania along with the symptoms of depression all at once. So they feel depressed and awful, but they have to deal with all that impulsivity and the racing thoughts. And it's very much, unfortunately, quite the burden, quite the wretched state for people to go through. So sometimes there are even those mixed states. And bipolar, cyclothymia, whatever the issue may be, can have a really profound impact on people's lives. It impacts them directly in their work life, their personal life, impacts their ability to perform well on the job. Although it is very noteworthy, there are people who manage these symptoms very well. And in fact, they do great in the professional world. So it's possible, but it's an added challenge. It is true, there are even certain elements of the heightened state that can be harnessed in effective ways on jobs. I always like to point out where we can even find some strength and resilience. And then personally, it can impact a person's ability to have a relationship with others in the first place. A lot of people report feeling exhausted, at least at particular times when they struggle with these issues. And certainly there can be a lot of distress to spouses in particular, or loved ones, often parents, of people who struggle with these issues. Significant distress can be there. And the other thing I would add is I gave people the issue through the lens of the diagnoses that are in my current manual. I would say, if anything, we're increasingly, very wisely, treating what's going on with bipolar as a spectrum issue. So if anything, we're only going to add more nuance over time with different diagnoses and situations that arise, because we're just trying to be more and more accurate about where on the spectrum people lie. Another thing that I mentioned, I always want to offer hope, right? I'm Catholic. That's a big Catholic thing. We always want to offer people hope. First of all, there can be good aspects that can be harnessed out of this various conditions, as I noted. And also, there can be significant challenges. And, on the high end of the spectrum, people's lives can be very chaotic, very destructive, and people can be very distressed who are loved ones of people who struggle with these issues. And on the lower end of the spectrum, there are still significant issues, just in a much more moderate way, right? So people might even be functioning day to day pretty well, but they might be more tired than usual, might be more worn out. They might be too stressed or anxious at certain times of their cycle. And for all of these people, there is hope. And as I go along, I'm going to talk about different tools and different options that can help people manage bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders in really positive and effective ways. First, we're going to discuss the thinker or thinkers who are really having an impact on the field today. There are some absolutely fantastic thinkers in the world of bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders, and they have different personalities, different skill sets. That often tells us a lot about a various issue, which is that there's a lot going on in this case with bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders. So it's really helpful to come at it from a wide range of different angles, and that will be a theme as I'm talking throughout. The common thread that I would say is there among the three thinkers I'm going to discuss is compassion. Very different skill sets, very different personalities, but all very, very compassionate. And doesn't that tell us a lot right there about what's required to deal with these issues? That a person, first and foremost, who struggles with these issues needs to learn how to be compassionate with herself or himself. And also the practitioners need to extend a lot of compassion. No pun intended or anything. There can be a lot of ups and downs in what is going on here. Maybe a little bit of a pun intended. Okay. That was my dad joke moment. But there can be a lot of ups and downs. And so it's really important for people to be compassionate with themselves and to have someone who is journeying with them, going through all of this, who's willing to go on those ups and downs with them, utilizing a lot of compassion. So first of all, we've got Dr. Chris Aiken, MD, Yale trained, absolutely brilliant, a psychiatrist and psychotherapist. He became a leader in the field after encountering friends who struggle with mood issues. And in fact, he's got that personal tie. And he even has, it really shows through a real fondness and a real understanding for people who struggle with these issues. He is very much what you'd think of with an MD, maybe a little more subdued in personality, very calm, very soothing. And he absolutely is that type of person where, I can envision various people going up and down through the world of mood, and him being that nice, stable, calm presence who's accompanying. He's systematic, and his big thing is that he separates, and I think very wisely so, emotion and mood, and that our mood does not necessarily have a lot to do with emotion, And it's instead much more of this predisposition to thinking and feeling a certain way. And as people go through this, he really preaches a healthy mindfulness and awareness of what's going on. And then he encourages people to be less affective with an A and more effective with an E. Next up is kind of the name in the world of bipolar mood and cyclothymia, Dr. Marsha Linehan, the founder of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. She's creative, she's thoughtful, she's empathetic, and she shares her personal journey pretty frequently, which is that as a healer, she really started out and there was a lot of structure that was given to people, but she felt like there was no sense of relationship. And so she really, really increased empathy and focused on the therapeutic relationship. And that was great. She built these beautiful foundational relationships with people, but then she felt like she didn't have structure to offer people. So she kept the empathy that helped her build that great foundational relationship. And then she offered this really structured, systematic approach of dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, which I'll be talking about throughout. And it's been really a blessing to so many people. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. Caitlin Baxter-Musser, she's an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. Vibrant, upbeat, relational, definitely one of the more, the sunnier figures in the world of dealing with mood and these issues. And she's great. You know, again, she feels really receptive. I would say that people, no matter how they're coming into her, she's going to work with them where they're at. And I think that's a really key component of things. The healer really being willing to meet people where they're at, and then also giving that to people. That's what so much of the DBT process is about. Giving a person a sense of self-compassion, and then really helpful tools for meeting themselves where they're at, and really kind of guiding themselves through difficult emotions, difficult moods, and difficult situations. And we are going to talk about a really wide range of different things moving forward. So stay tuned. It's going to be great. Before I offer some good practical tools for managing bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders, I do want to offer an important note that everything I'm offering here does not constitute formal medical, psychological, mental health, or other advice. And while I hope everyone benefits from what I have to offer here, indeed many people have benefited as I've worked with them on various issues from these tools, I can't guarantee anything, don't guarantee anything. I do offer therapy as a service, but other than that, as of right now, I'm not marketing any formal product. I don't have any affiliation with any particular organization of note or anything like that. So with that, let us dive in. And the place we're going to begin is a very important place, which is, you may recall that I discussed bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders as spectrum issues. So locating a place on this spectrum really makes a big difference. On the low end of the spectrum, we might have somebody with cyclothymia where they're just feeling a little up every month and a little bit down, and they have to manage that, right? And then maybe, say, as we get to the middle of the spectrum, we get a person who might really be feeling depression and get really impulsive, maybe really irritable in some of the upstates. And then on the high end of the spectrum, we really might have someone where when they're having an episode, their reality is not reality, and they're feeling really out of control. They aren't in control of themselves and can be a threat of harm to themselves and others on the high end of the spectrum. So identifying where someone's at on the spectrum really, really makes a big difference. For example, for someone low to mid spectrum, a lot of the practical tools I'm offering here, sometimes maybe with a little medication support, can be enough to manage things effectively. And then toward the mid and high range of the spectrum, the need for medication likely increases a lot. And there are even IOPs, those are intensive outpatient programs, or PHPs, which are partial hospitalization programs. There are even full inpatient programs, which sometimes are appropriate, especially as we're getting toward that top half of the spectrum. Sometimes that is needed. And that is because there just needs to be a whole team of people working with someone on an issue. And it really needs to be dedicated. It really needs to be focused. There's everything from individual counseling to group therapy to psychiatry and more on that mid to high end of the spectrum. And sometimes that's absolutely required. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about are just good general tools for managing bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders. And another thing that I absolutely love that has occurred to me, the more and more I've worked with people on this issue, the more I've learned from great people who are these thinkers in the field. The truth is that there are foundational principles to managing bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders that we can all benefit from. So it's not like, hey, these principles, these tools are just helpful for people who are struggling with this issue, but we all can benefit from these things. So the first place I'll start is tools for depressive swings. So when someone is feeling down, good things that people can do include cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's going to be this general sense of mindfulness, being aware of what times of the month, especially if it's predictable, that a person's going to be feeling down. Sometimes with women, the feeling down does move along with the menstrual cycle. So it's helpful to track the menstrual cycle as well as depressive mood and see if things are lining up there. And cognitive behavioral therapy, right, is going to be very focused on thought. And the more aware someone is of what they're thinking, the better. So doing things like journaling, at least having time for maybe prayer and reflection, starting the day, maybe punctuating the day with little check-ins. You can either set an alarm or have regular times of prayer and check-in. What are the thoughts that I'm having? Is this thought leading me closer to what God is calling me to in a good, healthy life, or is it leading me farther away? And if it's farther away, what's the better thought? What's the better activity I can focus on? This absolutely lines up with Ignatius in the discernment of spirits. In fact, that Ignatius would say that our good positive thoughts, good positive activities are consolations leading us closer to God and the life that he has planned for us, and negative depressive thoughts that can get us to just kind of sit in things are desolations, leading us away from God and what God is calling us to. In more severe cases of depression, sometimes it's very difficult to motivate the self using thought. So we go to behavioral activation. In a lot of ways, that's kind of like treating yourself like Pavlov's dog. Pavlov's dog famously was shown meat and drooled, and then shown meat and drooled, and then they started ringing a bell and showing the dog meat and the dog drooled. They started ringing a bell and showing the dog meat and the dog drooled, and then they pulled away the meat and they just started ringing the bell and the dog drooled, right? Because the dog was trained to associate the ringing of the bell with the meat. And this is a good behavioral activation is a good and dignified way of approaching things where people are treating themselves this way, that they're conditioning themselves in good and positive ways. So with behavioral activation, first, it's good to identify values. What are your core values? Certainly as Catholics, what are different virtues that we're pursuing and working on developing, but even just kind of general life values. Like I really value being the best husband I can be. I really value being the best father I can be. I really value being the best parish member I can be, the best employee I can be, right? Like these different kind of like value statements, and the values give rise to goals, right? What are going to be my weekly goals? Great ones for people who struggle with depressive states involve social activity, right? This week, I'm going to go out 2 times and I'm going to socialize, especially if I don't feel like it. And that's exactly what behavioral activation is for, when you don't feel like it and when even your thoughts are tough to control, right? But to still push through. So the first thing we're going to do is negative reinforcement, which has a very deceptive name. It actually has to do with removing obstacles, right? What are the obstacles that are keeping me from social events? Have I planned them out well enough? Maybe I can line up a friend so I feel like I have a companion at the event, right? If I'm feeling too lonely when going to the event, that friend will even provide some nice external pressure, external reinforcement there can always be a good thing. A person has transportation issues. I can line up good transportation to that event, right? All those obstacles we're removing with behavioral activation. And then this pushing into the event. We say emotion follows action, that you won't feel like going to the event. I can guarantee you won't feel like going to that event. But what you need to do is push through that, go to the event, and then emotion follows action. That sense of comfort will follow. And so you need to push. And then after the event, positive reinforcement. Is there a little treat you can offer yourself if you're doing well enough with diet? Maybe a little bit of chocolate. Maybe you can read a book you love. Maybe listen to some music that you enjoy. Having this sense of, hey, there are good things that I'm rewarding myself with. And we can see, when I really flesh it out, how behavioral activation can be effective, especially in those cases where depression is really high. What a gift it is that we have this tool that even if that negative feeling is going to be there, even if people are really struggling with the thoughts, they can still push themselves through things in good and positive ways. Okay, I'm going to get into the world of DBT now. Dialectical behavioral therapy. There are different skills that we focus on in DBT. First one is mindfulness, something I'm already touching on, right? Journal, track, right? Know what times of the month you're likely going to be up, right? In an up state. Know what times of the month you're going to be in a down state. And it's good to get really somatic, soma meaning of the body, with mindfulness. So what we need to do is I really say, hey, how am I feeling? Well, I'm depressed, right? But let's remember, depression is a mood, right? Oh, how am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling a little manic or hypomanic or even just a little up. Well, that's a mood, right? But that's not necessarily the emotion that I'm feeling. What's the emotion that I'm feeling right now? Can I slow things down? Can I pray and can I invite God into my body and really have a dialogue with God about what I'm feeling? And it's very important to know, where am I feeling it in my body? It's so helpful and so important. Oh, there actually is a physical sensation. And I can know in the future when I have this physical sensation that this is the emotion that I am having. What do I need to do to process through this emotion? Why am I having it? Right? Okay. How can I reconcile myself with this emotion? Is it arising from a particular situation? And also a great question to ask methodically and in prayer is this emotion telling me something? We call it giving the emotion a voice. Is it telling me something? Is it trying to drive me to a good and positive action? Well, if it is, then take it. All right, DBT skills 2, distress tolerance. It involves self-soothing, muscular relaxation, warm baths, listening to music. You can have some candy. Candy actually is outstanding. Of course, hey, if diet doesn't allow it, diet doesn't allow it. But what's nice about candy is it awakens the senses. You're getting a little bit of the olfactory and then you're getting a lot of the taste going. It's grounding, right? With distress tolerance, Again, if we're looking for a key commonality, the key commonality here is they're all grounding. Everything I'm talking about here is grounding. It gets you rooted in your body and feeling like when you're distressed, it feels like the world is out of control, right? And that's because the brain, that amygdala near the brainstem, is in a state of hyperarousal. It's in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And what we're doing is we're flipping the off switch on that. We're flipping the off switch on that with self-soothing, with muscular relaxation. There's a great process, interoception. Feet flat on the floor, you're going to start feeling grounded already. You try it. It's amazing. Put your feet flat on the floor, shoulders back in the chair. Let all your muscles go limp, right? And just focus on where you used to have tension in your body. And now you don't. And you know, you can pray. Again, 30 seconds or more, right? Give it that. We found if you have muscular relaxation for 30 seconds or more, it's very difficult for the brain to remain in that state of hyperarousal. It's like flipping an off switch. Warm baths, again, somatic, soothing and somatic, right? We're grounding the body, we're calming the body. Listening to music, we're activating the auditory and we're grounding the body. Candy, we're activating taste and grounding the body. And the last one is aromatherapy, especially with lavender. I've had people have very good success carrying around vials of essential oil that smells like lavender in a keychain, or you can have a lavender plant around the house if you want to go hardcore, really, really all natural. And it is great. This is all aimed at what I think I would call the foundational principle of foundational principles in the world of DBT, which is radical acceptance. And I want to be very clear by what we mean by that. Radical acceptance is not saying that everything in life is hunky-dory and all good, even if it's really terrible. It is not saying that. It is saying, this, to quote Linehan here, it is what it is, right? This sense of I can be at peace that this is a fallen world, and it's not to say the people and the things in my life are all good. It is to say that they are. And I'm going to let them be what they are and seek peace with that, this interior freedom. As Catholics, we would say being fully alive, right? You know, so it's not saying, oh, hey, John was a jerk to me and said something nasty, and that's great. Instead, it's saying, hey, John was a jerk to me today, you know, and when he was, this is what I felt. I felt disrespected and hurt, right? And I felt that maybe right in my gut, right in the center of me. I felt that, you know, it was almost like a stabbing. And, you know, I can reconcile myself with this though, right? That John's a wounded guy. Here's why. Here's how I can best understand John. I'm going to step outside of myself and understand him. What's going on with him, his situation. I call it, you can even pray for the God's eye view, right? That sense of perspective. And then say, you know what? I think a good, healthy action I can take toward John is to share my feelings, even to assert what is right, especially if John's an unreasonable sort of fellow. Unreasonable person rules apply, right? I can assert what is good to John and let him know what the negative consequences are if he doesn't respect my boundary. And that we're mixing in some of the later skills here, right? But I want to really flesh out what radical acceptance looks like. It's not saying this bad person and this bad thing, or person who's misbehaving and this bad thing, it's not saying they're a good thing. It's saying it is what it is. A woman once wisely said to me, she learned that sometimes people and events are not worth the emotional expenditure. That is a radical acceptance statement right there. DBT skills 3, emotional regulation. Moving beyond good and bad, right? We don't want just good feelings and bad feelings. It's a good situation, it's a bad situation. We want this sense of what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body? What's it coming from? What's it driving me toward? Building in positive experiences is so important. I don't want people's only affective experiences to be the negative. In fact, we've found that people's emotional regulation flourishes toward good experiences. Oh, and there's good stuff here. How do we know an experience is good? If it has truth, if it has beauty, and if it has goodness, I can guarantee you that it is a good, positive experience. What can you do to build more truth, beauty, and goodness into your life? You can pray. You can go to the sacraments. You can read scripture, right? You can also read a good book that reveals a lot of truth, that inspires you, right? To feel inspired. It's an emotion. You can go out in nature, right? I'm a Franciscan Marian, right? Marians of the Immaculate Conception, Litsia Immaculata. Very much Franciscan Marian spirituality. We call it the book of creation, right? You go out and look at that book of creation and you see God's creation with wonder and awe as a reflection of how great he is. Oh my goodness, that's a positive experience. Can you connect with a friend so desperately needed, right? When I say friend, I mean a good, positive person to connect with and just enjoy. Can you do what we would call a ritual of connection? Do something playful, something fun, something that gets you outside of your head. Do a puzzle, do a game, take a bike ride, go for a walk, right? Exercise, positive experience, right? Brain's releasing all kinds of GABA that's even helping us regulate difficult emotions further down the line, so good. Build in the positive experiences and work in journaling and reflection. Absolutely, as a Catholic. End of day, what would Ignatius say? Do your examine, right? Hey, what was good today? I'm doing more of it, right? What positive experiences did I build in? Oh, I'm doing more of it. And what wasn't good? How can I emotionally regulate better in those difficult circumstances? There is so much wisdom in that evening examine and looking back. Of course, prayerfully. I mean, one of the best ways to do anything all the time, right? Prayerfully. All right, DDT skills 4, communication skills. And what we're talking about there is that people often struggle in the area of communication. And this is going to be wide ranging. We're talking pretty broadly. So first of all, if you know you're likely going to be at certain places mood wise and somebody is a really central part of your life, communicate it to them up front, right? Don't just know it for yourself and plan for it. Communicate it to them. Hey, I think I'm probably going to be up this weekend. Hey, I think I'm probably going to be down this weekend. These are going to be things that I'm going to be focused on this weekend. I want to let you know up front. I'm even going to let you know up front different ways you might be able to support me in that. Is there anything I can support you in that for, right? These are things I want you to pray for me about. What can I pray about for you, right? Great ways to communicate. Share the feelings, right? Oh, something happened. I feel triggered. I want to share with you up front. I feel triggered. This is the emotion that I'm feeling. I don't even feel like I'm in a good enough place to discuss it yet. I'm gonna withdraw. Give me like 5-10 minutes so I can ground, get out of this state of hyperarousal, process through it. Then let's talk. Let's keep open minds and open hearts and let's talk. And then another massive part of communication. Sometimes what we would call the difference that makes the difference is boundary setting. And with boundary setting, is so much of the challenge is that when someone struggles with these issues, they're having relationships that we would say are enmeshed, that they lack boundaries. And so identifying our boundaries, a lot of boundaries surround our needs, what we need, and what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with. And then communicating it to a person. And I also sharing with them what the good thing that will happen will be if the boundary is honored, and what the bad thing will happen, the bad consequence will be if it's not honored, right? So for example, I was washing the dishes, and when I was washing the dishes, you called me an idiot, that I was stupid for how I was doing the dishes. Well, when you called me an idiot, I felt hurt and disrespected and offended. And in the future, I would like you to make your requests respectfully. And if you do, then I will continue doing the dishes. If not, I'm going to have to stop doing the dishes. You're going to have to do them yourself. That'll be the consequence. And I'm just going to spend the time in self-soothing and self-care because that's what I need to do. A healthy way to establish the boundary and communicate it. I now am going to talk about other elements that often arise with bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders. One of the key components is wellness. And as Catholics, we add a fourth component to the usual wellness triad, which is diet, sleep, and exercise. And the fourth element or component that we add is prayer. So it can be very helpful to begin the day with prayer. Daily mass can be great, regular confession, all the graces that we get from the sacraments can help so much. And praying, having a really good sacramental life. What happens for all of us is our lifetime tends to fall kind of into order if we're prioritizing those spiritual elements in good and healthy ways. And the same is true for bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders. And certainly the graces we receive from prayer and the sacraments can be so healing and need to be a real foundation. Diet. One key thing to look at is a very gut healthy diet. Different people have different things that work for them. So this is just me speaking in general. But people doing things like having a spoon of fish oil daily, having a spoon of extra virgin olive oil daily, multivitamin, a yogurt, kefir, or kombucha or probiotic supplement, those healthy probiotics for the gut, and then at least 4 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables daily. It is very helpful to eat foods that are rich in dopamine, and you can always Google that, a dopamine diet. A lot of the time, dopamine levels are not quite right when it comes to bipolar, cyclothymia, and mood disorders. And so eating for good dopamine production is very, very helpful. Sometimes it really helps to have a lot of tyrosine in your diet, and that's an amino acid that really helps to bolster dopamine production in the body. Sleep, another key thing. Obviously, there are going to be scope issues with sleep that if somebody's in an upstate, sleep is going to be limited. So we're really talking about maximizing sleep, whatever that might look like, as opposed to something, and in a lot of cases, something that absolutely just gets that person 8 hours of sleep, right? Ideally, we'd like 8 hours of sleep, early to bed, early to rise. And that's on average. Different people can run off different levels. But that's the ideal, and that's not always scope-wise what is possible. But it's good to maximize sleep. You can take a look at hygiene, sleep hygiene. What are good sleep practices that people can practice so that they get as much sleep as possible? Having a dark room, no screens within 3 hours of sleep, at least 1 hour, I would hope, but 3 is the best. I'm kind of reading a book or doing something else before laying down, having a nice cool sleeping area, using a weighted blanket. It can be very, very helpful to even mindfully track what a person is doing that is helpful with sleep and what's not. So that way you can even be aware, hey, when I'm having a good night's sleep, why is that? What were the factors that contributed? What were the ones that were not? You can pick up on all kinds of factors, including different things that you're doing to help you sleep better, as well as where you might be in any cycle between being in an upstate or a downstate. And exercise is the last category that I'll talk about. Really helps to do a combination of both cardio and weights, maybe cardio about 4 times a week. Weights can be very light weights, about 3 times per week. Doing integrative exercise is particularly helpful. That would be like soul core or Pilates. There are just general integrative exercises. You can Google those out there. Those help the brain and the body. And so they can be spectacular. And as I noted in a previous part of the talk, you do get GABA and all kinds of good things that are released in exercise that really help with emotional regulation and stabilizing the overall system. So very, very helpful for bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders. Another thing that comes up sometimes, which can be a very challenging topic and very, very important to always take it seriously, is suicide ideation. So I just want to make a note on suicide ideation really quickly. It should always be taken quickly. It is always a good idea to ask a person, are you having suicidal thoughts? If yes, do they have a plan? If yes, do they have the means to carry out the plan? And if a person has suicidal thoughts and they have a plan at that level of things, it's time for that person to get medical assistance immediately and to take that seriously. So, we never want to not take that seriously. If a person won't seek that assistance, then it is important to call 911 out of love for them. Sometimes people do even almost imply or threaten suicide in a relationship situation. Again, very, very important to always take that seriously. In every single instance that somebody is implying or threatening suicide, you should dial 911. And the reason for that is the person either is suicidal, in which case you are not qualified to help them and they need to have a qualified professional help them, or if they are threatening and they're not serious, they need to learn how serious that is by having someone show up and by having qualified professionals assess the situation. So always take suicide ideation seriously. Even things at the level of thought, it's important to have a well thought out discussion about that. And it still may be necessary to get that person to a professional sooner rather than later, maybe even right away in the moment. So always take suicide ideation seriously. All right, medication does come up a fair amount with bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders, especially in the mid to high range of the spectrum, but can be helpful in any of a number of situations. I'm not a prescribing professional, so I always refer out in cases like these. I always refer to a psychiatrist as opposed to a general practitioner. The reason is that the psychiatrist has expertise in diagnosing. Really, there needs to be a differential diagnosis, and then there are a wide range of different medications that they need to make a judgment call on choosing between. It really, really helps to have a psychiatrist doing that as opposed to a general practitioner. And a very important example is that a lot of the symptoms of bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders and ADHD can be similar. So that's a really important differential diagnosis to make. It's in fact one of the most important differential diagnoses in all of mental health, because if a person has bipolar cyclothymia or mood disorder, they're going to get one type of med. And if they get diagnosed with ADHD, they're going to get an amphetamine, which would be like Ritalin or Adderall, something in that neck of the woods. And in fact, if somebody gets that diagnosis wrong, they diagnose the person with ADHD, or I'm sorry, if a person has bipolar or cyclothymia or a mood disorder, they get diagnosed with ADHD inaccurately, and they're given an amphetamine, Ritalin or Adderall, it can actually trigger manic states. And that is a really, really awful thing. So it's really important to have that psychiatrist get that differential diagnosis right and then prescribe accordingly. Now, for bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders, there are a suite of different medications that can be prescribed. Lithium and mood stabilizers. Really, I would say there are certain types of cases, again, which is why it's so important to have a psychiatrist looking at this, because they know which ones they are. There are certain types of cases of bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders where lithium is really helpful, and there are certain types where it's not. So lithium's a good option to be considered in general, though, because it is really helpful in some of the cases. Other mood stabilizers might work better in other situations. Sometimes SSRIs are prescribed. Those are going to be selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And antidepressant medications can increase the level of serotonin in the brain. Not sometimes, again, especially maybe in more of a depressive type of a bipolar cyclothymia or mood disorder may make sense. So could come up. And then antipsychotics are the other really common type of medication. Antipsychotics are very helpful in that they do address dopamine levels in the brain, and a lot of the time it's dopamine levels not being right that are causing the underlying problem. Also, there are some new meds that are getting prescribed now that are in other categories that do hit dopamine levels that are prescribed. So again, we're talking about a really wide range of different types of things that can be diagnosed, really wide range of different things that can be prescribed. So really important to have not just a psychiatrist, but one with very good expertise who's doing the diagnosing and prescribing. What makes for a great psychiatrist? Well, expertise. So being competent is important, being caring, and then being collaborative. And what I mean is that it's really helpful for people to treat interactions with psychiatrists like consumer experiences. And so you go and they have a service, and what you're trying to measure is, does this person seem competent? Do they seem to care? And are they collaborative? What I mean by collaborative is, do they take your input? Are they really listening to what's going on? Are they explaining why they're diagnosing what they're diagnosing? Are they explaining why they're prescribing what they're prescribing? Is there a really healthy kind of back and forth dialogue going on? Do you get a really good feeling in your gut when you are talking to this person? These are all really, really important questions for a person to consider and or criteria. And if things are going well, you're getting a good feeling in your gut, you're getting that sense, this is a good fit. You get that sense, oh, this is a good fit. Well, then praise God. I think you've probably found that person who's the right psychiatrist for you. But if not, you may in the short term need to keep working with that one. But on the side, I would encourage you to keep talking to other people until you get that sense, hey, this person's caring, collaborative, and competent, and this is a fit. And, I often talk to people in dating situations, and the importance of them saying to themselves, hey, there's a certain standard of person here who I deserve. And I feel exactly the same way about that with psychiatrists. You deserve a prescribing professional who's caring, who's collaborative, and who is competent. Once you are taking medications, it's important to look out for side effects. There can be strong side effects sometimes with brain meds. So different things, these are just examples: facial twitching, severe headache, short-term memory loss, almost feeling like you're jumping out of your skin, suicide ideation. These are just some of the examples of really bad side effects that if you get them, you want to stop taking the med right away and go right back to your prescribing professional. If there aren't really bad side effects and things are moving along, a lot of the time with a lot of the meds, not necessarily all, so you have to take it on a case-by-case basis, but with a lot of meds, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks for the full positive impact of the med to kick in. So it'll be 4 to 6 weeks, at which time you're going to have a follow-up meeting, ideally, with that psychiatrist, and you're going to discuss dosage level as well as whether you have the right med. And that's going to be part of an ongoing relationship where there are these regular check-ins to see how it's going. And you're having all the important discussions you need to have as your life situation might change, as the way you're reacting to meds might change, anything with needs or situation might change. It is such an important ongoing relationship, which is why it's really important to make sure you have someone who is an outstanding fit. For a final thought, I'm going to talk about underlying principles. And as you may recall, one of the key principles when we are dealing with bipolar cyclothymia and mood disorders is radical acceptance. It's this sense of it is what it is, and interior freedom. Another key thing is to trust your primary thought and primary emotion. A lot of the time, one of the things that arises is someone has a reaction to a particular situation, and then this voice of doubt kicks in, and there's a secondary emotion of false or bad guilt, and there are all these thoughts getting a person to doubt that original thought and feeling. And no, we need to stay with the primary thought and the primary emotion. As Catholics, radical means rooted. And in fact, it dates back to our Catholic faith in the founding of the church, that we are radical and we are the best kind of rooted. We are rooted in the person of Jesus Christ. And when we are, we can have that sense of interior freedom, and it is what it is. And we can be free from the feeling of fault guilt, the desolation of fault guilt, Ignatius would say, and any of those thoughts that tell us to doubt. If you need help in your process, please feel free to reach out. But regardless, know of prayers in my rosary and in my chaplet. May you receive graces from Mary, who is full of grace, to have the strength of God to manage your bipolar, cyclothymia, or mood issues, and to have relationships that flourish, starting with your relationship with Christ through Mary. God bless. For therapy, reach out to CatholicHealingInstitute.com.